a single spark lands on dry grass. For less than a second, it glows orange in the dark, and then it simply goes out. Nothing happens. No flame catches, no warmth spreads. The moment passes, unnoticed, the way most moments in deep time pass, without consequence, without witness, without memory. Most people assume fire was discovered. A single brilliant instant, a caveman staring in wonder at a burning branch, and suddenly, civilization begins. That is not what happened. Fire was not discovered. It was survived, avoided, feared, stolen, lost, and stolen again, for hundreds of thousands of years, before it ever became a tool. To understand how our ancestors came to control fire, you first have to understand how long they lived beside it, without controlling it at all. 2 million years ago, fire already existed on Earth. Lightning struck dry savanna grass, and forests burned the way they still do today, violently, unpredictably, and without any human involvement whatsoever. Early hominins did not ignite these fires. They encountered them. And an encounter with an active wildfire, for a small, slow, thin-skinned primate, was not an opportunity. It was one of the most dangerous events in its environment. So, the first relationship our ancestors had with fire was not creation. It was flight. But something strange happens after a wildfire passes. The landscape it leaves behind is not simply destroyed, it is transformed. And for a scavenging, opportunistic species, transformation can mean opportunity. Burned ground exposes fleeing animals too slow or too injured to escape. Roots and tubers, once buried and inedible, are left roasted just beneath the surface of the scorched earth. Predators that once controlled that territory are, for a short time, gone. Researchers studying early hominin sites have noticed something strange in the archaeological layers near ancient burn zones. Spikes in scavenged bone fragments, concentrated in the days after a natural fire would have swept through. Not fire-making, fire following. This is the first unglamorous truth about our ancestors and fire. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were not its masters. We were its opportunists. Creatures who had learned to read the aftermath of a disaster and quietly profit from it. That single behavioral shift, walking toward the wreckage instead of away from it, is the first thread in a story that will eventually lead to everything we call civilization. The next shift did not happen in a moment. It happened across an almost incomprehensible stretch of time. A slow erosion of fear, one generation at a time. At sites like Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, researchers have uncovered ash and charred bone dating back roughly 1 million years. Some of the earliest suggestive evidence of hominins existing in close, repeated contact with fire, deep inside a cave, far from any lightning strike. The debate among scientists is not whether fire was present. It is whether it was still being carried in, smoldering embers, scavenged from a wildfire and kept alive, or whether, by then, something had changed. That distinction matters more than it seems. An animal that flees fire is behaving on instinct. An animal that scavenges its aftermath is behaving with opportunism. But an animal that carries a burning ember, protects it from wind and rain, feeds it, and keeps it alive across days it did not create the flame for, that animal has crossed into something else entirely. It has begun to think about tomorrow. This is where the story stops being about fire and starts being about the mind holding it. Consider what it actually requires to keep an ember alive without knowing how to create one. You must know that flame needs fuel, and you must know it before it goes out, not after. You must understand that wind can kill it, and rain can kill it faster. You must assign someone, or some group, the task of watching it through the night, every night indefinitely, because if it dies, it may not come back. There is no written record of the first firekeepers, no name, no face, no grave marked with what they carried. But every controlled hearth ever built afterward, every fire that cooked meat, warmed a shelter, or lit a cave wall so someone could see well enough to paint, descends from an unbroken chain of individuals who did not let the flame go out. For a species with no other reliable way to produce fire from nothing, that chain was fragile beyond anything we can easily imagine. One bad storm, one night of carelessness, one group separated from the others during a migration. Any of these could sever a fire lineage permanently. And there would be no way to know, no way to signal for help, no way to borrow flame from a neighboring group 100 miles away. Fire, for most of human prehistory, was not renewable. It was inherited. Which raises the uncomfortable question underneath all of this. If fire was this difficult to sustain, why did it matter enough to sustain at all? The answer scientists have converged on is not warmth, and it is not light. It is something stranger, and something that reshaped us at the level of biology itself. Cooking. Raw meat and raw plant matter require enormous amounts of energy to digest. Chewing alone can consume hours of a primate's day, and the gut still extracts only a fraction of the calories locked inside the food. Cooking changes that equation completely. Heat breaks down fibrous tissue and starches before they ever reach the stomach, effectively performing digestion outside the body before the first bite. Some researchers argue this single shift, pre-digestion by fire, freed up a caloric surplus that the human body redirected somewhere unexpected, into the brain. The human brain consumes roughly 20% of the body's total energy at rest, a staggering cost for any organism to sustain in the wild. Without a cheaper way to extract calories from food, some scientists suggest that surplus may never have existed at all. If this is correct, then the fire that our ancestors nursed through countless fragile nights did not simply cook their dinner. It may have helped build the organ writing these words and the one reading them. But biology was only the beginning of what fire rewired. A cooking fire forces something that raw foraging never required: people sitting still, together, facing the same point of light, for hours after the sun has gone down. For nearly the entire history of life on Earth, darkness meant one thing: vulnerability. Predators hunt at night. Vision fails at night. Every other waking hour of a hominin's life had been organized around threat, movement, and survival. And then, for the first time, there was a reason to stay in one place after dark, deliberately, without fleeing it. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have noticed something the daytime hours never produce. Firelit conversation is different. Daytime talk, recorded among groups like the Ju-Hoan-Si of the Kalahari, is dominated by practical matters: complaints, coordination, economic concerns. But nighttime firelit talk shifts almost entirely towards something else: stories, myths, social memory. The kind of speech that transmits values across a generation instead of coordinating a single afternoon. If this pattern held for our ancestors, and there is no obvious reason it wouldn't have, then the fire circle may be the first stage humanity ever built, not for entertainment. For culture itself, held together by a light source fragile enough that losing it could mean losing everything spoken beside it. And yet, for all of this, our ancestors still could not create fire. They could only keep it. That final leap, striking stone against pyrite, or spinning a wooden drill fast enough to coax an ember from friction alone, appears far later in the archaeological record, and even then, unevenly across different populations, at different times, arrived at independently more than once. It is one of the strangest asymmetries in human history. We controlled fire's use for the better part of 1,000,000 years before we reliably controlled its creation. Which means for most of that time, a group's entire relationship to warmth, cooked food, protection from predators, and firelit culture depended on something achingly fragile: a coal, wrapped and carried, watched every hour of every day, inherited from people who were themselves only inheriting it. There is something quietly devastating in that image. Long before humans wrote language, built shelter, or domesticated a single animal, we had already learned one of the deepest lessons any species can learn: that the things which make us who we are not guaranteed. They must be tended, and if no one tends them, they do not wait for us to notice before they go out. We tend to think of fire as something ancient humans conquered, a triumphant milestone on the road to modern life. But the truth sits closer to the opposite. For the vast majority of the time humans have lived beside fire, we were the ones being shaped by it, biologically, socially, psychologically, while it remained something we could lose in a single unwatched night. Perhaps that is the real inheritance, not the flame itself, but the vigilance it demanded. The first thing our species ever learned to protect, long before it had anything else worth protecting at all. Somewhere, in a version of that story lost to time, a fire finally did go out. No ember survived it. No one recorded whether the group that lost it ever found flame again or waited in the dark for a wildfire that might never come. We will never know how many times that happened before it stopped happening for good. We only know that eventually it did. Like and subscribe. See you in the next.